Hey, it's Jeremy from Tested.
And Sean from Tested.
And we are here at Other Ocean with our old friend Mike Micah. We worked on Star-Lords with Mike and Kevin from Other Ocean most of last year. It felt like a good 6 months or so from last year. And we had such a good time making this arcade game that we unveiled at California Extreme that we didn't want to stop, and we wanted to keep working with you guys. And so you, thankfully, had a great idea of how we could do that. And we've been working on this project for about 3 months now, and we can't wait to tell you guys about it.
Well, yeah, absolutely. After Star-Lords, we got the bug for doing stuff with physical things because arcade games were kind of like I don't know, something you'd walk into as part of an environment, and it really got you into the game, the cabinet, and all that stuff. So we wanted to take that a step further, and we've been experimenting a bit with the new streaming platform Mixer. And it's got this really interactive layer to it, something very similar to what we had done previously with a game that we created called iDarb, where the audience watching can interact with the video feed in any way we want. And on top of that, it also had a really cool low latency video feedback loop, so we could have things happen and return back to the user really quickly. And if you're pressing a button, you'd see that reaction really fast.
So the people who are watching, they don't just have to watch and maybe type some chat and maybe wait for a reply a minute later. They can engage immediately.
It's near instantaneous. Yeah. And so with that, we're like, okay, this is some really cool tech. What can we do collectively that could take that and make that into some sort of game that we could play online? And we didn't want it to be just a video game, because everybody tunes into Twitch or Mixer and these things just to watch video games being played. We're like, we should do something a little more tangible, something a little cool. Like, how do we get people to play Star-Lords? And what's the natural progression of that? And so we came up with this idea. There's a bunch of us actually kind of spitballing on this, in which we started like we did with Star-Lords. We're like, what kind of game would we want to recreate? And we thought of combat. We're like, that's simple.
Yeah, start from the beginning.
Yeah, let's just go right there to the very beginning of video games, basically, and create a tank game, and we could probably get some remote control tanks and figure out how to control those online, and how do we share that?
We bought some remote control tanks. They were, how much were they, like $17 or something from Amazon? And we prototyped a build with these things, and we got something working, but we realized very quickly that these off-the-shelf tanks weren't going to give us what we needed. They weren't going to, in terms of torque and capabilities, we needed to build something from scratch.
And if we're going to make a game out of this, we needed all that information, because we're like, what kind of gameplay are we going to see emerge from this? And we don't really know exactly the perfect game this is going to turn into in the end. Like, what kind of game are we really starting for? But we knew we had to start somewhere. So we started with combat, but we didn't know for sure how the positioning was going to work. So we then evolved that into, let's do a small sports style game. Like soccer is universally understood. There's games like Rocket League and it was even the old game Ball Blazer that were inspired by those sorts of sports. And we're like, let's just have a game where we're pushing a ball into a goal and start there. And this will force us to actually understand how the technology works, where your position is, how you track scoring, and how interaction should work. And we're going to start there and see what happens next.
So, like with Star-Lords, there's a big division of virtual and physical work that had to be done on these tanks. So let's move over to the battlefield, our play field, and Sean and I can talk to you a little bit about what went into making the physical tanks themselves. So the first step after moving away from the off-the-shelf tanks was to find that kit. And we found a kit that was a good start, wouldn't you say?
I mean, it's literally the chassis.
It is a steel chassis that you can build on top of. It has lots of mounting holes in it. It comes with 2 motors. And that's it. I mean,
and the treads. That's
true. It did come with the treads.
Yeah, so it's just the base that we needed to put everything else on.
Right, but it was, what, $20? It was not something that's going to be robust and last a long time. So you made some modifications to it. What did you do?
Yeah, overall this was not bad. The treads are really nice. You can remove the pins and shorten and lengthen them as needed. Yeah. But we ran into a few problems off the bat that the original axles, there's a free spinning wheel and then the wheel that the motor runs off of. These are just literally big screws, and they started to very quickly grind through the plastic hubs. So we were getting this plastic dust, and they just kept getting sloppier. So one of the first things we did is I came up with one that has a smoother bore and then these really cool dry run sleeve bearings that I drilled out holes, and we have 2 sets of bearings in these now.
Oh, wow.
So they should run a lot longer before we run into problems.
And smoother.
And then the other thing we ran into is, like, I started building some obstacles,
ramps,
which was a ramp. And my ramp was a little steep as it was, but we discovered that these really slick, smooth treads would slip a little bit.
They're just plastic.
So you can get a spray Plastidip, a rubberized coating that I sprayed on these, and it gives them just enough grip that they can get up inclines better and stuff like that.
This is my first time feeling them, and it really feels like it's a completely different material.
Yeah, it's great. And originally as we have learned from other projects that we've worked on, you have to figure out like what boards are we using, what's our power supply, and that often informs the design of the final product because we have to fit those in.
Right.
And especially in this case, we had this giant battery, and this is kind of one of our early tanks where everything was literally just taped, cable tied, Velcroed on. And we just kept doing that until we figured out.
So we had all the components.
Yeah, so
as ugly as possible.
I was printing things as we went along. So like this was we needed a catcher for the ball. And originally I designed a 3D printed one, but I was like, well, I don't know if that's going to be the right shape, height, size. So it's adjustable height. And these are flexible rulers like you would use for measuring curves and stuff. I cut it up so we can, adjust it and then figure out the ultimate configuration for the catcher.
Right.
So any of the stuff that I made, I try to make it adjustable so that we could tweak it as we went. And I think this is like the first full version 1 of the tank where we have like the hard mount for the camera and the everything clips in and it has places for all the boards and I tried to make it modular so like this whole tower will clip out and the battery clips out so that we can swap things really quick.
It was really important to have a hard-locked angle for the camera because Kevin's going to be doing some really interesting world mapping, essentially, and he needs to know precisely what angle is the horizon in relation to the tank. So this was originally on a pivoting thing, so we swapped over to a very clearly hard.
Yeah, it was, but that was actually, once again, it was a magnetic ball joint, which was great for prototyping because we could keep fiddling with it. And once we dialed that in, we just figured out the angle and then hard mount it, and then we just tried to add a little protection for some of the boards and stuff. So like eventually this will probably have like a real body that it looks like something, but I think this is pretty neat for now.
I think this is fantastic looking. I mean, especially compared to how it used to look.
Oh God, yeah.
As far as the electronics go, we didn't quite know exactly what we'd be asked to do for this game that doesn't exist yet. So we made a lot of capabilities to see, and then we'll find the fun using those. Initially though, we needed to control the tanks. And were we going to do that using RF? Or are we going to do that using like 2.4 gigahertz, like radio controlled signals like you would for a car or traditional radio controlled tanks? We ended up just using Wi-Fi. And we're using a particle photon on here, which is basically an Arduino, the built-in Wi-Fi, but much more powerful. And it gets on the Wi-Fi network here. In fact, all of our tanks do. They have their own IP address, and we send them UDP packets, and we tell it how fast to go left and right, and we control basically as you would a tank.
Yeah, and you run the 12 volts from our giant battery into that, and then that goes to the motors.
Exactly. Yeah. So we're using this Phobot, which is basically just a motor controller with a photon. And it takes the 12 volts, sends it to the motors, and 5 volt. It has a regulator for the 5 volts for the photon. And then on the back here, we initially tried to hook this directly into the photon. We have this, what's called a POSIX tracking system. Mike was the one that discovered this. Kevin looked at it, said this might work. Initially, we were actually going to go with vision, and we were using a camera to look at the playfield.
And you got it working.
Yeah, no, they got it working. We OpenCV, and we tried to get basically a camera to discern where the tanks were. The problem was that was only going to get us 2D positional, and it wasn't going to get us really accurate orientation. And we wanted to know where is this tank, both in X and Y, and potentially in Z, because eventually we want to make this thing a big structure. In addition, we really want to know like what direction is the tank facing, and is it on an incline and that kind of thing. So enter POSIX. It's a 6-degree tracking system that is based on ultra wideband. So if you look around the corners of this arena, we have basically like these little GPS satellites, right? But they're really called anchors, and this will triangulate itself looking at the signals from these 4 anchors. All the tanks do, and they also relate to each other. So now we have this thing that we actually can create a fully virtual representation of everything that's happening on this battlefield, playfield, whatever we're going to call it. And so we can actually play out the game virtually and have it relayed in the real world accurately.
Which is so cool.
It's really neat. That means that we can now really start to map one to the other. And so we can add things, we can augment things into the game because we know where everything is and where the players are facing. So we also added an NFC reader. So that we can run over NFC tags and maybe have power-ups like speed boosts or spin-outs.
One of my favorite features you guys added.
Yeah, it's
fantastic.
Super cool. That just connects into the photon. And we have, as we mentioned, the camera, which is a Wi-Fi camera. It has its own transmitter in there. So it just goes up into the server as well. It's not relayed through anything else. Everything's syncing up pretty well though, so far so good. We're pretty happy with that. You're again, like your structure, all of your 3D prints came out fantastic. I'm super happy about this. And on the playfield itself, we have goals. The goals have beam detectors, so if the ball rolls through the beam, it detects that a goal's been made.
Yep.
And we now have a ball hopper, which will spit out balls
I can't wait to see this in
at
action.
the whim of the internet or Kevin or however they game designers intend to use it. It can spit out balls onto the playfield. The thinking initially is if a player scores a goal, the computer will take over the tank, put it back into the starting position,
right,
and then release a ball and then give the players control again. That seems like the basic starting point.
Yeah, and you know, we have grander plans for this, but we just kind of started with this. I use pegboard for this, thinking that if we were going to put obstacles like a la combat, we could snap it into the grid section.
Yeah.
We haven't used it quite as much in that capacity, but it's a good starting point, and I think ultimately what we're thinking is we're going to raise this up kind of like a train platform, so we can like get under it, do wiring, do effects, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what we come up with.
Well, speaking of the augmented virtual stuff, there's a lot to talk about over there. So why don't we have it over to Kevin and Mike and check in on the PC.
All right, so here we are with the heart of the software team, Kevin and Jason, and they're helping us connect all the hardware that Jeremy and Sean have put together to the software side. And what they're working on right now, essentially, and what we've been trying to get pulled together here, is the ability to track all these guys here in the same way that we would track them in a real virtual version of a game like this. So we want to know position, rotation, height, angle, all these things, and interpret that so that we can actually apply game logic to what's going on. So we can determine if they're in a key area of a goal and they have to be out for causing like fouls or whatever, these sorts of things. So it's essentially what we're doing. Jason is working on the core design of the game, and Kevin's working on all the mechanical aspects and the architecture of this system. And I don't know, Kevin, do you want to go into a little bit about what you're doing here?
Yeah, this is just a kind of an overview representation of all of the tanks' positioning and their angles and whatnot. Jason right now is driving one of the tanks, and you can see it moving around on here.
And a lot of the reason for this is so we can kind of create a more, like, imagine an augmented reality layer of this where we know when a tank is aiming at another tank.
Absolutely.
Or if they're near each other, or even if we wanted AI to take over one of these tanks.
Yeah, it's crucial for AI because with this we can now track where the tanks are and then drive tanks around, avoid obstacles, all of that sort of thing. But yeah, this is the heart of it right now. So this PC right now is basically reading the controls from Mixer, reading the positions that the tanks are sending, reading the angles that it's sending. We also have it hooked up to the goals, so when a goal gets triggered, we'll drop another ball in. All these things, this is like the heart of it. And it's just a mishmash of everything put together.
I'm repeatedly surprised at how well this actually works, because I'm looking at a screen now where we see all the positions and where the tanks are aiming. Then I'm looking on Mixer, and I see the perspective from every tank, the actual camera feed coming into each tank, being controlled by people online right now as we're testing this, Jason being one of them. Anybody can come in right now and control these. And which one are you controlling, Jason?
T2, right in the upper left corner here.
Awesome. And the goal of this game so far, what we've set up really, is to create like a small soccer game, something that's very reminiscent of like Rocket League and these sorts of things. Where do you think we'll be able to take it from here?
Well, that's the thing. I think the tanks are, you can think of the tanks as like a platform, like any other sort of a gaming platform. And the soccer-like game that we've set up is really just the beginning. It's just sort of a proof of concept. And from here, we can do almost anything that we want. You can think of the tanks as either players, you can think of them as cameras, you can think of them as enemy players, you can think of them as teammates, you can think of them as obstacles. The possibilities are endless, and I think the beauty of having the tanks as a gaming platform is that computers have simulated physics in video games for years, but there's nothing quite like controlling real-life objects and interacting with real-life physics, especially over the internet. It's just sort of mind-blowing. Like, it's what you can do with it. The feeling is so satisfying, and it's really sort of, I would say, unlike anything I've interacted with before. So it's pretty cool to have this as a platform in which to create new games.
I think that's one of the best parts for me is you can create this in Unreal or Unity in like a day and do little tanks going around all this stuff and put some physics on and everything like that. But for whatever reason, controlling real tanks in a real world environment and the kind of problems that come with that, it's way more fun.
It's totally different. Yeah.
It's when you start controlling these things around online, you don't want to stop, which it's amazing to me.
Right, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun for people to kind of, you know, in a regular video game, you know that there are secrets hard coded somewhere in the game, but the secrets are kind of, you know, they're organic. It's like, what can I do to kind of break this maybe?
Well, we've experienced that. I think that's kind of the fun of this, is like what people do when they come in here. We've had people come in just randomly from around the world, jump into our stream as we're working on this, and get the tank to escape from the playfield and just start cruising around our office. And I think there's something about that too. Like while we're trying to get this game together, I think there's even more places we can go with it, like an escape room or something like that with these.
Right.
Yeah, that's really cool.
So that's where we're at. It's not just in development, it has barely begun development, am I right?
That's pretty much right, because at this point we're pulling it all together, we're just gonna go live. Yeah. And when that happens is when these all work.
It's gonna happen now, right? There's gonna be a link at the bottom of this video that people can click, you can try this game.
And don't be afraid to comment in the comment section, because we're going to be watching and seeing what's going on and give all your feedback right there live to us as we use it.
That's the point, right?
Yeah.
This is the beginning, and whatever feedback we get from people, we're going to try to implement and iterate and make it something enjoyable. The more suggestions they have, the more fun we get to have. Right?
Exactly. Okay. We're going to chase the fun.
This is so bonkers.
Mike's just like puttering around over there.
Oh, that's it. Disable. Fight.